It's Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to Battle of Tours, the Franks Beat Back the Muslim Caliphate documentary by Kings and Generals. Now, according to the playlist, this is the last episode in this series about the early Muslim expansion. So thank you to everyone who's been on this journey with me, learning something new, and thank you for the support I've got for reacting to this series, and I really do appreciate it, because I've always it's nice to learn something about a different history from a different region. For example, I don't know why I decided to say it like that, but anyway, that's by the by. So if you haven't seen my reactions to the other episodes in this series, I suggest you check them out before checking this one out. And of course, the usual disclaimer: if I don't show so much what is considered a proper reaction, it is probably obvious I don't know much about the subject at hand, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely pause the video to give my input or ask any curious questions, which hopefully will be answered in the comments below. With that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and check out and hopefully subscribe to Kings and Generals, another great history channel here on YouTube. One of many, even better than the actual history channel from the TV. So I have heard about the Battle of Tours, but I have not known the finer details. So, like I said, the link to the original video in the description down below. And before I start waffling on and go into a really ridiculous tangent, let's get this up on the screen. And sorry, just make sure that my microphone hasn't disconnected itself again. Everything seems fine. Oh, captions on. And let's see what happens in this episode. Ooh. Bloody hell, that's loud.
The year is 732. In the mountains near Samarkand, a reluctant commander leads the city's garrison on a mission he already fears is doomed. The smoke on the horizon draws closer, suddenly biting the eyes of his soldiers as the wind shifts. Not simply the smoke of the enemy camps, but raging grass fires set in their path by their canny nomad foes. Outside Tor, an army that has already trampled over the peasant levies of Aquitaine spies a disciplined phalanx of Frankish spears atop a hill before them. A moment's doubt setting in as commander and soldier alike recognize a new kind of adversary. It has been 100 years since the death of the Prophet Muhammad, and in that time, the movement he began has grown into a mighty empire and toppled yesterday's great powers. But these and other battles, raging 6,000 kilometers apart, would put it to the test, even as pressures from within threatened to topple it entirely.
I know I'm a broken record at this point, and people are saying, probably thinking, for fuck's sake, just shut up about it. But sometimes we do have to be reminded this happens to pretty much almost every single this pretty much happens to, well, saying that, it happens to practically every empire. Loads of infighting, loads of rebellions, and corruption. Which, unfortunately, it rots like old fruit and it spoils all it touches. And also a bit of paranoia, well, lots of paranoia, that can lead to the downfall of practically any empire in history. Even though nowadays we're in an age where having an empire is pretty much redundant. But that's how I see it, so...
Video is sponsored by our kind YouTube members and patrons, without whom our work would have been impossible. Patrons and YouTube members get active and much more. Thanks for supporting us. We couldn't be doing it without your help.
Feel free to check that out if you're interested.
After the death of Caliph Yazid in 724, the first consequence of his successor Hisham's rise to power would be something of a disaster. During the last year of Yazid's reign, a major expedition in...
Yeah, that's the problem when any new successor takes the reins of an empire already struggling from within. or a very damaged empire. A doomed campaign in Transoxiana. I don't know why, but that's such a cool name. I just don't know why I said
had
that.
been planned by the then governor, Muslim ibn Said al-Kilabi.
Wow.
The army raised, like most Umayyad armies, included significant detachments from tribes loyal to both the Qays and Yamani tribal federations of Arabia, two rival groups that had grown in power and spread across the domains of the Caliphate with every conquest. In the past, the Yamani had been the favoured faction of the Umayyad caliphs, with the Qays even siding with the Zubayrids during the Second Fitna. Though following the Second Fitna's conclusion, the Umayyads opted to make efforts to reconcile with the Qays and win their support, rather than punishing them for their rebellion. Yet the Caliphate's efforts to remain neutral and above the feud were felt as a betrayal by the loyal Yamani.
Wow.
This would lead to serious tension when, shortly after the campaign,
After Hisham's ascension to the throne, the governorship of Iraq was replaced by Khaled ibn al-Abdallah al-Qasari. I hope I pronounced that right. While the governorship of Khorasan was replaced by Khalid's brother, Asad ibn Abdallah al-Qasari. I think I kind of butchered that, but still.
Was launched, the throne changed hands, and the new caliph had al-Kilabi replaced as governor. Though removed from his post, al-Kilabi decided to continue with his campaign, but this would cause the simmering rivalries between the Qays and Yamani to spring to life. As al-Kilabi belonged to the Qaysi, the Yamani contingent under Amr ibn Muslim refused to follow him across the Oxus after his demotion, preferring to wait for him to be removed and follow his replacement into battle instead. The first fighting in al-Kilabi's grand campaign would occur outside Balkh and be Arab against Arab, with al-Kilabi and his loyal followers bringing the Yamani to heel by force, a poor start to a doomed campaign. Weakened by internal conflict, and with many of the defeated Yamani deserting, al-Kilabi's diminished army joined with Sogdian and Hephthalite allies from still loyal principalities such as Samarkand and Saganian to march against Turgesh-aligned Fergana. No sooner would they arrive than their hopes were dashed by the news that Khan Suluk, Khan of the Turgesh and their turncoat former ally, was prepared for them, and already en route with a large army. Tasking his Persian quartermaster Abdallah to organize a retreat, al-Kilabi attempted to withdraw his forces in good order, but was harried for 9 days by Turgesh horsemen during this retreat, with parts of his army being attacked piecemeal, as some of the lesser tribes and local allies were split from the main force. Crossing the Jaxates would mean relative safety for the retreating army, and they ended the 9th day close by, though al-Kilabi opted to make camp rather than travel by darkness and risk nighttime raids. This would prove a mistake though, as the Turgesh-aligned forces of Fergana and Tashkent used this opportunity to maneuver themselves between the river and the retreating Arabs. Al-Kilabi's army, already exhausted from more than a week of forced marching, awoke to find enemies both before and behind them, their path of retreat and access to water cut off. With no other options, al-Kilabi ordered his exhausted army forward, beginning a battle that would be remembered as the Day of Thirst. The day was won by the Muslims, but the cost was heavy. The rearguard's commander, Humayd ibn Abdallah, died in battle to hold off the Turgesh pursuers, but the bulk of the army eventually succeeded in breaking through the enemy lines to cross the river. Ultimately, the heavy casualties and abandonment by local allies meant this Pyrrhic victory on the Jaxates massively weakened caliphal power in Transoxiana, with the Arabs withdrawing to more secure frontiers around Balkh as former vassals abandoned the caliphate in favour of the Turgesh, and by extension the Tang Empire of China's sphere of influence. Despite the new governor Asad ibn Abdallah's best efforts to rebuild trust and good relations with the caliphate's local Sogdian allies over the next 3 years. The worsening rivalry between the Qaysi and Yamani federations would be of further concern as well, with some tribal leaders among the spurned Yaman Federation joining the Mohammedads in clandestine support for the Abbasid clan's whispers of revolution, and one even turning to the Kharijite heresy and embarking on a short, doomed rebellion in Yemen the following year. The years 724 to approximately 727 saw the Caliphate remain fairly stable and secure, if not entirely at peace. Cyprus was raided by sea, and attacks on the Byzantines by the long-serving general Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik continued in Anatolia, with Caesarea being conquered in mid-726. The Eastern Roman Empire was far from toothless, however. Emperor Leo the Isaurian, who had beaten back the massive siege of Constantinople some years prior, had ended the years of anarchy that saw so many emperors raised and deposed, and brought a measure of stability back to the Caliphate's oldest rival. Under pressure, and unable to compete with the Caliphate in direct military might, Leo's hopes lay with his ally on the Caliphate's northern frontier, the Khazar Khaganate. 727 would see the Caucasus Mountains become a major battleground for the still recently enthroned Hisham, part of the ongoing Arab-Khazar wars that will be the focus of an upcoming series.
Okay.
The Khazars would not be the only threat to face the Caliphate in this period, and the following year of 728 only spelled further trouble, both in the north and east, with even Samarkand, which had long served as the stronghold and regional capital for the Caliphate in Transoxiana, erupting in unrest. Following the Day of Thirst, Governor Asad ibn Abdallah al-Kasri had initially succeeded in stabilizing the Umayyad hold, but with the tribal feud within his ranks worsening and Abbasid-backed missionaries and seditionists beginning to make their presence felt in the Caliphate's far east, al-Kasri seems to have been overtaken by paranoia by 726, dealing out punishments to many perceived enemies, some severe and some humiliating, flogging his predecessor's right-hand man, Nasser ibn Sayyar, having a collection of tribal leaders imprisoned and shaved bald repeatedly in mockery, and chopping off the legs and hands of a suspected seditionist. These and other actions began to alienate both his forces and the locals, and led to his replacement in 728 by Ashras ibn Abdallah al-Salami. Hoping to inspire greater support and loyalty from the locals, Ashras sent the missionary Abu al-Saida to Samarkand and the surrounding regions to call for conversion to Islam, with al-Saida promising the lifting of the jizya tax.
Caliph Umar II had already attempted to ban such practices after previous rebellions among converts.
Tax from all converts. His efforts were remarkably successful, bringing in numerous converts and building mosques in the city. But after Samarkand's ruler Gurak complained to Ashras of falling revenues and suggested some had simply feigned conversion to escape taxation, the governor eventually ordered the recent conversions to be ignored and the tax collection to continue as before. Outraged, more than 7,000 locals refused to pay their taxes, supported by Abu al-Saida in opposition to Ashras and the Caliphate. The imprisonment of the missionary and other leaders among the would-be rebels diffused the situation before it could devolve into bloodshed, but the disillusioned former followers of al-Saida sent offers of alliance to the Turgesh Khan Suluk to drive out the Caliphate from Samarkand, further undermining their hold. Things would only get worse in 729. Resolving to take the fight to Suluk with another offensive campaign, Ashras sent his vanguard commander, Qatan ibn Qutayba, son of the great conqueror Qutayba ibn Muslim.
Qatan wasn't the only one in the field with a famous ancestor among Suluk's court, and acting as his envoy was the grandson of the last Sassanid emperor, apparently to give some legitimacy to the conquest.
Ahead of him across the Oxus, as he camped in Amul with the bulk of his army. Despite initial setbacks and raids on Qatan's camp, Ashras would score an initial victory in driving back the raiders and recovering their plunder as he advanced to join the vanguard, camping in the trading town of Baikand near Turkish-aligned Bukhara. But in a near repeat of the Day of Thirst, the Arab army was encircled by night, awakening to find themselves again cut off from water. In the following battle
famous horse archer tactic, hit and run.
Of Baikand, despite thirst sapping the army's strength and the Turgesh killing more than 700 in the initial bloody engagements, Qatan and Ashras separately managed to break through enemy lines and escape with their forces, each thinking the other had perished for 2 days before rejoining each other among the still Arab-held forts near Bukhara. Ashras did seize victory of a sort from this setback, Suluk's pursuit was turned back after a bloody 2-month siege at the fort of Kamaja, initially driving its Arab garrison from their trenches outside the fort and storming the gates, only for the defenders to light blazing fires in the midst of the fighting and force the Turks back. After several failed attempts to break the defenders' resolve through assaults on the walls, attempts at bribery, and a mass execution of prisoners that was copied in equally grisly fashion by the defiant garrison, Suluk was forced to withdraw, allowing Ashras to lay siege to Bukhara and even capture it in 730 after wintering at a nearby oasis. But even this short victory would soon be for naught. In the aftermath of Baikand, Gurek defected to become another ally to the Turgesh, and though the sizable
Either following capture or due to a dispute with Ashras, anti-Arab tension in Samarkand may have played a role.
Arab garrison in Samarkand under Sora ibn al-Hur still held the city itself, it was now surrounded by hostile territory and ruling over a hostile population. When Suluk marched on Samarkand in 731 to restore Gurek to the lordship of his city, the new governor, Al-Junayd ibn Abd al-Rahman, sent a large army, recorded as 28,000 strong, to relieve them. But the relief force would find itself besieged in turn after Suluk lifted the siege to intercept it in the steep, dry Taktakaracha pass between Kish and Samarkand.
Wow.
A battle broke out in the narrow pass, cavalry clashing on the more open Muslim right flank, while fierce fighting took place on foot against the cliffs on the Muslim left. Though the fighting was close, with slaves and the Arab baggage train even being offered their freedom to join the fighting, the Muslim right was soon broken and driven back, leaving Al-Junayd under pressure in the centre. With the two battered armies separating at dusk, Al-Junayd, tasting likely defeat in any further open battle, made the decision to dig trenches and fortify their camp despite the lack of a water source, sending orders to Samarkand's garrison of 12,000 to depart the city and relieve their relief force. As the garrison sallied forth on their mission, despite Sora's misgivings and attempted refusal, spies sent word of their coming ahead to Suluk and Gurek, who departed from the pass to seize their true prize, meeting them in battle atop a hill not far from the camp of Al-Junayd. Here, without cliffs to protect their flanks or the numbers to match the Turgesh allied army, the garrison found themselves marching into grass fires set by their foes and harried by cavalry on all sides. The outnumbered force was soon shattered, run down and slaughtered by enemy horsemen as their confused formations broke up in the thick dust and smoke. Sora died in battle, and although Al-Junayd would survive and escape thanks to this diversion, this decisive defeat, coupled with a religious revolt led by Al-Harith ibn Saraij in 734 that united a portion of the Arab settlers with overtaxed local converts against the weakened Umayyads, would cause the almost total collapse of power in Arab Transoxiana for nearly a decade to follow. The most storied battle of Caliph Hisham's reign did not take place in Transoxiana, however, but in France. The Caliphate's previous defeat to Duke Odo at Toulouse, though a major setback, had not spelled the end of their ambitions in the region, and numerous raids were launched from the forward base of Narbonne during the 720s. 730 saw Duke Odo take advantage of the infighting in Al-Andalus to form an unusual alliance by giving his daughter Lampégie in marriage to Uthman ibn Naisa, often called Munuza in Frankish texts, a Berber leader in command of modern-day Catalonia. Though this deal would briefly stop the raids and bring a measure of security to Aquitaine, it would very quickly backfire when Uthman rose in rebellion against the recently appointed Arab governor Abdurrahman al-Ghafiqi. With his allies' ill-advised rebellion swiftly crushed, Odo found himself facing not simple Berber raids, but the incensed and vengeful governor's army, which in early 732 launched a lightning attack into Navarre, seizing Bordeaux by storm and inflicting a heavy defeat on Odo at the River Garonne. With the hero of Toulouse bloodied and on the retreat, the path seemed open for a far greater offensive than Al-Sam's. But in an act of desperation, Odo swore fealty to his one-time rival Charles, steward to the puppet king Theuderic IV, and the effective ruler of the Franks. While Charles had been absent in Toulouse, he had not spent the intervening 11 years idly. Knowing a confrontation with Al-Andalus was inevitable, he had taken out a large loan from the Pope, equipping and training one of the only professional standing armies in Western Europe since the collapse of the Roman Empire. In comparison, Abdul-Rahman, though remembered as a just and generous leader in Arab texts, seemed quite unprepared for confrontation with a rival such as Charles, unsurprising considering the rapid turnover of Umayyad governors and the preoccupation with Arab-Berber rivalries closer to home that the governor had worked so hard to calm. With his foes on the move and Otto's independence broken, the mayor of all the Franks gathered up a powerful army to halt the Umayyad incursion, joining the remnants of Otto's forces in October at the city of Tor in the path of the Umayyad advance. Reaching Tor on October 4th, Abdul-Rahman and his army, heavily laden with plunder already, were surprised to find an army in an organized phalanx-like formation atop a hill just south of the city and the Loire River, and were left with the decision to fight or to abandon the loot they had taken at Bordeaux and withdraw. Tor was a rich prize, and Charles seems to have relied on its attractiveness as a target, and Abdul-Rahman's confidence after his decisive victory at Caron to compel the Arab leader to attack. If the Umayyad army chose to withdraw, Charles's army of heavy infantry would be ill-suited to pursue, and would risk annihilation if they broke formation to do so, leaving the decision to do battle in the hands of the Muslims. With more than 25,000 soldiers and high-quality heavy cavalry unmatched by the Christian kingdoms of Europe, bolstered by fresh Berber horsemen from Ifriqiya, Abdul-Rahman held some major advantages over his outnumbered foes of some 17,000 to 20,000. Yet a cavalry charge, devastating though it could be in the right circumstances, relied heavily on the terror it could inspire. If the Franks held their ground in the face of a charge, rather than breaking, their tight formation and the uphill fighting would render the governor's strongest weapon relatively impotent.
Not if they use a lot of spears, because like most people would know that cavalry's main weakness is spears or pole arms in general. But still.
Rather than rush to a decision, the Umayyad army made camp, waiting in standoff for 6 days. Though despite the approaching winter and the bitter cold setting in, the Franks did not abandon their defensive readiness atop the hill, the warmer clothing they had brought south with them from Austrasia serving them well as the invaders shivered in their camp. Finally, on October 10th, Abdul-Rahman made the decision to attack, worrying an order to abandon the treasure might lead...
Well, you think about it, the Arabs have been mostly fighting in like warmer climates, and it's very rare you see them go into a colder climate. But bear in mind, even though they might have gone into like East Anatolia and towards Constantinople, yeah, it can get cold there, especially with a few mountainous regions there, but still not as bear in mind, France is further in. If you like put the scale, like Constantinople's there, France is much higher north, so it's going to be a lot colder. And the Franks' heavier armor for the infantry might give the Franks the advantage here.
To descend in the ranks, and trusting his experienced soldiers to win him another victory. The main body of the Frankish army, Charles's professional heavy infantry, held firm on the hilltop, while raiders from among levied and local troops were dispatched to harry the Umayyad rear, taking advantage of paths through the nearby forests to maneuver past the enemy army despite its greater numbers and mobility. Abdul-Rahman, for his part, is remembered as a capable general, but whether out of overconfidence or a desire to finish the battle swiftly before his army suffered another freezing October night, he played his hand early in the battle, riding with his best heavy cavalry in a series of charges at the battle's start that failed to dislodge the still fresh and eager Franks. Were he facing an army of levies and conscripts, as most of Western Europe would have sent against him, these heavy cavalry charges might have produced the panic and rout Abdul-Rahman hoped for, but instead casualties began to mount among the Umayyad army's finest, while the forests and nearby river prevented him encircling the mostly stationary Frankish army with his greater numbers. Despite the initial setbacks for the Umayyads, the battle was certainly not a one-sided one, and as the day of October 10th progressed, the outcome hung in the balance, with casualties on both sides rising until the armies parted at nightfall. The battle's end varies slightly between tellings, although most of the basic facts remain consistent. The official Frankish account, sponsored by the Carolingian dynasty, simply describes the Franks slaughtering their foes and driving them from the field with little further detail. The Mozarabic chronicle, contrarily, claims the Umayyads simply left during the night, with the Franks tensely awaiting another attack in the morning before discovering their foes' tents empty. The most complete account, and one that has worked its way into most tellings since, is an anonymous Arab chronicle that tells a somewhat different story than either. On the morning of the 11th, the Arabs returned to their attack on the Frankish formation, holding their own and, if the slightly dramatic telling is to be believed, breaking through the centre of the formation to push towards Charles, coming close to breaking the Franks completely. But a small force of Franks, likely levies or survivors from Otto's army, not trained to hold formation with Charles's professional soldiers, took advantage of paths through the forest to raid the Arab camp. Small though the force might have been, confusion and fog of war magnified its impact on the battle, with the attacking cavalry breaking off the attack to rush back to camp, worried their treasure might be stolen, or that a larger force could still be hidden among the forest to encircle them. Abdul Rahman remained at the front and tried to stem the retreat, but the Franks were quicker to take advantage of the momentary confusion, surging forward and killing the governor and those around him with a hail of spears. If hope still remained to restore order to the disoriented army, Abdul Rahman's death put an end to it, and the Franks soon turned the confusion into total rout. The Battle of Tor is today one of the most discussed and best remembered battles of the early Middle Ages, credited by some with ending the threat of the Caliphate to Western Europe. Its impact on history is a matter of some debate, particularly compared to the earlier battle at Toulouse. It is true that Tor looms much larger in Christian than Arab accounts. While the devastating defeat and Charles's prowess were certainly noted by Arab historians, it gets no more attention than Toulouse, even being absent from the quite thorough history of Al-Tabari. It has been suggested by some that Charles and his Carolingian descendants' prominent place in European history caused their triumph at Tor to take exaggerated importance compared to the victory of the more obscure Duke Otto. And while it is true no further invasions of such a scale ever occurred, the Arabs did continue their raiding over the following years, and Berber revolts and the imminent splintering of the Caliphate likely had as much or more to do with the end of expansion than the defeat at Tor. Yet whether or not the Battle of Tor can be fully credited with ending the threat of the Caliphate in the West, the prestige it won Charles in the eyes of the Pope and the Franks, and more pragmatically, the forced subjugation of his last Frankish rival Otto, made it an important moment in the unification of the Frankish realm, paving the way for the Frankish Empire of his grandson Charlemagne to resurrect the spirit of Rome in the West, and serving as a founding moment of glory for the Carolingian dynasty. It was through this victory Charles would become known to his countrymen and to history as Charles Martel, or Martellus, the Hammer. With the stage thus set, the next season of early Muslim expansion will turn the page to a new chapter in the history of the Caliphate with the Abbasid Revolution and the fall of the Umayyads. More videos on early Islamic history are on the way. To ensure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and press the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive.
And that'll do it. This is this has been a great series and a great episode from Kings and Generals, and yeah, thank you for all the support, and thank you for watching my reactions to this series, and just double checking. Yeah. There doesn't seem to be any more. Yep. Sorry, I'm just checking. Okay. Yeah, sorry, just thought I'd double check. Yeah, so this is the end of this series, so if you like my reaction to this series, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.